There was a time when the land itself seemed to move with them. Across the deserts, the plains and the rolling hills of the American West, wild horses ran like living shadows. Their hooves struck the earth in rhythm, their manes carried by the wind, their presence as natural as the sky above them. They were not guided, they were not contained, they belonged entirely to the open world. To many, they came to represent freedom, not the idea of it, but the real thing. Uncontrolled, unrestricted, unbroken. Long before roads cut through the land, before fences divided the horizon, and before engines replaced movement, these horses lived in a world that had no limits. And in that world, they thrived. But the story of wild horses in America does not begin with cowboys or the frontier. It goes back much further. Millions of years ago, the earliest ancestors of the modern horse evolved right here in North America. They were small, forest-dwelling creatures, nothing like the powerful animals we recognize today. Over time, as the landscape changed, they changed with it, growing larger, stronger, faster. They adapted, they survived, until one day they didn't. Around 10,000 years ago, horses disappeared from this continent entirely. Whether due to climate shifts, human activity, or a combination of both, they vanished. The land that had once shaped them fell silent. For thousands of years there were no horses here, no hoofbeats, no herds, no movement across the plains, until they returned. When Spanish explorers arrived in the Americas, they brought horses with them. These animals, once domesticated and controlled, did something remarkable. Some escaped, and once they did, they didn't hesitate. They ran, back into the wild, into the deserts, the grasslands, the open spaces that had once belonged to their ancestors. And there, something incredible happened. They remembered, generation after generation, those horses adapted to the land once again. They learned to survive without human care. They formed herds. They followed water. They endured heat, cold, hunger, and distance. They became something new and something ancient at the same time. They became mustangs. The return of the horse didn't just change the land, it changed the people. For Native American tribes across the Great Plains, the arrival of the horse transformed everything. Travel became faster, hunting became more efficient. Entire cultures evolved around this new relationship. The horse was not just a tool, it was a partner, a companion in survival, a force that reshaped life itself. With a horse, distance meant less. Movement became fluid. The connection between human and land deepened. And in that connection, the horse became something more than an animal. It became a symbol. But the Mustang story was never easy. Life in the wild is unforgiving. Scorching summers, freezing winters, scarce water, endless movement. And yet the Mustangs endured. They adapted to harsh deserts, climbed rocky terrain, crossed open plains, and survived in places where survival itself seemed unlikely. They did not just live, they persisted. Through centuries of change, they became a living reflection of resilience, a reminder that life, when given space, finds a way forward. As time passed, the American West changed. Settlements expanded, farms replaced open land, fences divided what was once endless. The space that wild horses depended on began to shrink. What had once been freedom became limitation. Where herds once roamed without boundaries, they now encountered barriers. Where water sources once supported life, they became contested. The balance between land, animals, and people became more complex. And for the Mustang, survival became something different. Not just enduring nature, but navigating human presence. Today, wild horses stand at the center of an ongoing conflict. To some, they are symbols of heritage, living pieces of history that deserve protection. To others, they are competitors for land and resources, especially in regions where grazing is already limited. Governments, ranchers, conservationists, and communities all find themselves part of the same question. How do we share the land? Because the truth is, the modern world leaves little room for something completely wild. Roundups have become part of that reality. Helicopters drive herds across open land, separating them, relocating them, placing them into controlled environments. Some are adopted, some are moved to sanctuaries, some disappear into systems few people ever see. For the horses, it is a disruption of everything they know. For humans, it is an attempt to manage a problem that does not have a simple solution. And yet, not everyone sees wild horses as a problem. Across the country, there are people who see something worth protecting. Scientists who track herds across remote landscapes. Volunteers who monitor water sources. Advocates who fight to preserve natural habitats. These individuals are not just protecting animals. They are protecting a story, a legacy, a connection to something older than modern life. Some use technology, GPS tracking, drones, data analysis, to understand how herds move and survive. Others use art, photography and storytelling to remind the world why these horses matter. Different methods, same purpose, to ensure that wild horses do not vanish again. But even with these efforts, new challenges continue to emerge. Climate change is reshaping the landscapes these horses depend on. Droughts last longer. Water becomes harder to find. Vegetation becomes less reliable. In some areas, herds must travel farther than ever before just to survive. Foals struggle in harsher conditions. Competition for resources intensifies. And still, they run. Because in every mustang, there is something that refuses to disappear. A memory of movement, a rhythm of survival, a connection to the land that cannot be erased easily. The struggle of the wild horse today is not just about land. It is about identity. It is about whether something truly wild can still exist in a world that is constantly being shaped, controlled, and divided. Can freedom survive inside boundaries? Can wildness exist in a managed world? These are not just questions about horses. They are questions about us. Because when you look at a wild horse, you are not just seeing an animal. You are seeing something familiar. Resilience, adaptation. The will to keep going, even when the environment changes. The Mustang does not ask for permission to exist. It survives because it must. It moves because it has always moved. It endures because that is what it was built to do. And maybe that is why their story matters so much. Because in a world that often values control, speed, and certainty, the wild horse represents something different. It represents balance, a relationship with the land, not dominance over it, a way of living that listens, adapts, and responds. Even now, if you stand in the right place, far enough from cities, far enough from noise, you can still witness it. A herd moving across the horizon, dust rising beneath their hooves, the sound of movement carried by the wind. It's not just a moment, it's a reminder that something wild still exists. The future of wild horses is uncertain. Their survival depends not only on their strength, but on the decisions we make, how we use land, how we manage resources, how we choose to balance progress with preservation. Because losing them would mean more than losing a species. It would mean losing a connection to history, to nature, to a version of the world that still moves freely. And so the story continues. Across Nevada's deserts, across Wyoming's plains, across Montana's open country, they are still there, running, adapting, enduring. Because the wild horse does not represent the past. It represents something ongoing, something that refuses to disappear. And as long as even one herd continues to move across open land, as long as the sound of hooves still echoes through the silence, the spirit of the wild remains alive. And maybe that is what matters most. Not just that they survive, but that they remain wild, untamed, unbroken, still moving forward.